Richard's going to run you through the City Council workshop we gave Monday morning, which is a result of those 2 years of work that we've done. And I think it's a very important initiative that we continue to move now that we have the information. What I told the City Council Monday morning was, at a time where the community is growing and expanding and working on upgrading and improving their infrastructure such as sewers and roads, it's also important to have the parks and the green spaces in that same conversation. We know that right now that the green infrastructure that we do provide reduces flooding impacts and cleans air and cleans water. So these things are very necessary just for the basic human quality of life that we have here in Des Moines. We also know that our parks do many things as far as improve economic values of our community and improve the lives of people by having just a free space to recreate and improve their health. Richard's going to talk about these things now, and I'm very proud of this work as well as what we've been hearing tonight on other projects. So Richard, would you go ahead?
Thanks, Ben. Chair Nolan, members of the Park and Recreation Board, Richard Brown, Park Planner 3. This is the presentation we gave yesterday to the City Council at their workshop, and like Ben said, it represents a lot of work that we put into this, and are very excited to present the results of this inventory and where it's going to lead us as far as how we manage land in the future. Especially for everyone that's new here on the board, but in general, we want to talk a little bit about how we got to this point. Getting through a natural resource inventory is a project and a process that's really started several years ago for us. We also want to look at some of the major findings and conclusions that we found when we conducted this inventory. And finally, now that we have an inventory, how are we going to utilize it and move forward, especially as we're managing and looking at how we manage this land. A little bit about the history. About 5 to 7 years ago, we really started through our Park and Recreation Board and our Urban Conservation Advisory Committee looking at ways to have a more sustainable landscape through our park and open space system. We're managers and stewards of nearly 4,000 acres across the city of Des Moines, from parks that are just a couple acres in size to parks as large as Ewing, which is nearly 350, and thousands of contiguous acres of land along the 2 rivers in Des Moines. And additionally, beyond that, we started looking at how can we decrease some of our inputs. That means put less pesticides down, less fertilizers down, and really look at ways that we could decrease our irrigation across the park and open space system. And also at the same time, we want to look at, is there ways to increase the natural vegetation across the park and open space system? That being the prescribed burns that Ron talked about, looking at shoreline restorations. We've done some great work at Grays Lake, are working at Greenwood Pond now. Looking at reforestation since 2008, or excuse me, since 2006, we planted nearly 4,000 trees across our park and open space system to replace and encourage new growth across our forests. And finally, we started to look at restoring land. Areas like McHenry Park, we've done some restoration and prescribed burning out there. We're looking at, and we have done some implementation of prairies across our park and open space system. So we've really done a lot of changes here in the last 5 to 7 years. But it was really one project that kicked this all off. There came a proposal from the Army Corps of Engineers after the floods of 2008 that they wanted to rebuild the Birdland Levee. At the same time, we said it would be really great if we could do a new accessible trail connection between McHenry Park and the Riverview area down below. If you're not familiar, there's about a 60-foot grade change between the top of McHenry Park down to where Riverview is at. The old trail that used to be there was pretty much almost a straight up and down vertical, probably 20% grade there. So we said, is this an opportunity to do something better with the trail? What we found out there is actually, in order to do that, we'd have to change the face of McHenry Park and cut down about 150 mature trees. At that time, we weren't really sure what that meant from an ecological standpoint, and that really forced us as a department that if we wanted to move forward with this project, we needed to have good information for future decision making. So the council authorized us to move forward if we did a master plan for McHenry Park, but also too, if we would do a natural resource inventory and make sure that what was left out of McHenry Park was more ecologically sound. So you can see this photo here is actually some of our staff out planting a prairie once that work was taken care of. And now some of that prairie is really starting to come along a couple of years later. Once council authorized us to move forward with this project, we issued a competitive RFP to find someone that could conduct an inventory of our nearly 4,000 acres of park and open space land. We selected the most qualified person out there out of a selection of 6 different people that submitted proposals. In April 2011, the City Council hired Dr. Tom Rosburg from Drake University to complete the natural resource inventory for us. What we found out through this process, that even though Tom has sat on our Urban Conservation Advisory Committee, we didn't realize what a gem we had sitting right there. He is one of the most respected botanists in the state of Iowa, if not the entire Midwest. So we hit the jackpot that he was willing to come in and do our inventory for us. What we are asking him to do, we're asking him to inventory nearly 4,000 acres. This is the map that we included in this, but you can see here, we asked him to look at parks, open space areas, our golf courses, cemeteries, and our sports complexes. Each one of those is represented on the map there. What were we actually asking him to do? We asked him to take an in-depth look at our natural resources. We didn't ask him to go out and count every tree. We didn't ask him to go out and count every flower. But we asked him to take an inventory of the trees and the flowers and what plant communities that those things together create. We asked him for data to make informed recommendations and decisions. So we could stand up here in the front of the Park and Recreation Board in the City Council and make recommendations based on solid data that we got from him. And finally, we asked him to give us appropriate data that will allow us to work with the STAR community rating system. This is a nationwide program that is seeking to rate cities on their sustainability, such as the LEED program does for buildings. So we wanted appropriate data that would help us to rate the city's sustainability when it came to natural resources. One of the things is we had to ask ourselves why this is important to us. Our park system sees millions of visits each year. We know that from our trail counts to our counts at Grays Lake and the other 76 parks we have across the city. We found from surveys, citywide surveys, but also park and recreation surveys, that users want more ability to get out into our park and open space. They want to get past the playground. They want to get past the paved trail. They want to get out and experience it. And only 15% of that 4,000 acres is actually mowed. So you have nearly 85% of the park and open space system that can be explored by users. And also we wanted to really assess the natural resource health. What condition are our natural resources in? Are they very pristine? Are they very degraded? We didn't know that. And so we really needed to get an assessment of that so we can really move forward and manage our park and open space system correctly. What are we trying to do as part of this? We are trying to reduce our maintenance costs. We're finding that overall, managing these natural areas actually reduces our maintenance costs through the prescribed burns. Ron can take care of a lot of land with a prescribed burn every 3 to 5 years versus having to mow it 25 times a year and paying a contractor every single time. We found very historic and culturally significant landscapes. For example, this is McHenry Park, what we just talked about, getting a REAP grant. But you can see it's right in the shadow of downtown, and it's been protected for nearly 120 years. It's a remnant, it's a cultural historic landmark that dates back to when the city was founded. We also actually can provide ecosystem services. Like Ben said, we can absorb more water with well-managed landscapes. And we actually can increase passive recreation opportunities such as mountain biking, walking, hiking, wildlife viewing, areas that get you off the beaten path into our park system and really can take in the beauty and the awesomeness that is our parks. Oops, wrong way, sorry. Just a few of the things that we asked him to do as part of the inventory process. We wanted to map these plant communities. We wanted to know where they are, what each one was, and we actually wanted a description of the health. How healthy are they? Are they in good health or do they need a lot of work? We wanted some assessment of our management options. What are some key ways that we can take care of this land in a cost-effective way? Prescribed burning, are there minimal mows that we can do? Is there thinning of woodlands and forests? And then finally, knowing that we have a perennial budget issue where we have tight budgets, we wanted him to look and help us prioritize which areas need the most help right away, which ones can be restored right away and should be restored right away. As part of actually doing the inventory, he had to come up with a methodology. First thing he did once he got the job was actually went out and compared a lot of historical context. He was able to go out and get some of the original survey maps from before the city was founded or right after the city was founded in the 1850s to see what the original landscape looked like here. He was able to get historical aerial photos from the 1930s all the way through the day today to see what this landscape looked like, how it's changed over the years. He was also able to get soils maps. Soils maps are one of the key indicators of what actually these landscapes looked like when the city was founded. After that, he went out and walked all these spaces 3 times in 1 year. He went out and did a spring survey, a summer survey, and a fall survey to really get a full context of what these landscapes looked like and what they actually were and how they acted out there. Afterwards, he mapped every single one of these spaces, gave us GIS data so that we can work with our field staff, we can work with Public Works Department, we can work with all the different departments across the city to say this is what these areas are and this is the plants and communities that we found out there. He's actually compiled that data, and once it's all taken care of, we expect it to be about a 1,000-page report Dr. Rosburg has done. And this is maybe a really good point to say that we probably got the best deal ever from him, because this entire survey that's gone on for about 2 years cost the city about $52,000, which is probably equivalent to nearly a $500,000 study based on the amount of hours and work that he's put into it. Once he compiled that data, he was able to start doing assessments on the overall ecosystem health. He gave them scores based on the different species he found out there, and is preparing management recommendations for each one of these areas. Some we may want to take back to how they looked historically when the city was founded. Others we may want to manage for more diversity and different tree species based on future pests we might predict. Some of the major conclusions he's found is that the City of Des Moines Park and Open Space System has substantial ecological quality. For example here, this prairie trillium was found at Prospect Park, and he only found one of them, and I actually haven't been able to find it since he found it that one year, but it's the farthest west he's found it in the state of Iowa, and the first time it's actually been found in Polk County. So within our parks, there are great ecological quality. But at the same time, we do have threats from invasive species that nearly every one of our parks, its function and ecology could be infected or impacted by invasive species. And finally, he found some great examples of degraded oak savannas that should be targeted for restoration. When we really start to kind of talk about numbers of the ecological quality out here, he found 651 different species, from flowers to grasses to trees to shrubs. That's equivalent to 1/3 of all the species that are found in the state of Iowa can be found on the City of Des Moines Park and Open Space System. And when he talks about ecological quality, he talks about a percentage of the species that are conservative. Basically what he's saying is 17% of all the species that he found in our Park and Open Space System will only grow in areas that can't take a lot of disturbance, are very high quality ecologically. So we have great areas out there in our Park and Open Space System. This photo here is taken from McRae. So McRae is, just in the shadow of downtown, a great biological jewel we have. Additionally, we owe a lot of this to previous park boards and city councils that back in the early 1890s, they protected about 600 acres of which is our current Park and Open Space System. And it's because of that they purchased that land and put it in public protection that most of these areas are still here today. Grandview, this park photo was done from the early 1900s, and you can see some of these big trees that were out there in the early 1900s that are still out there today. Grandview, Greenwood, McRae, Waveland Golf Course, and Union Park were the first parks that are out there, and those are some of the areas he found some of the best stuff in our Park and Open Space System. Across the entire system, he found about 80 different diverse ecosystems, and he broke them down into 6 different categories: grasslands, shrublands, savannas, woodlands, forests, and wetlands. Just to give you an example of the work he did from a mapping standpoint, this is an example of the mapping that he's done through our GIS system of the Park and Open Space System. I didn't want to do the whole thing, but just give you a feel. This is McHenry Park at the top right. This is the old Riverview area, Des Moines River, and Prospect Park here. Every one of these areas he's walked and surveyed, found all the plants, defined what the actual communities are based on the soils and the plants and the trees that he found, and then mapped them all out and is actually providing assessment and management recommendations. So you can just see from here the great amount of work that he went to really tell us what we had out there. One of the things he noted, and was one of the key recommendations, or I guess key conclusions, is that we have an issue with invasive species. And as kind of targeted in his report, invasive species are designed as a species that are non-native to the ecosystem under consideration and whose introduction causes or is likely to cause economic or environmental harm to human health. So using his definition that he used in the inventory, he found 12 species pose the greatest threat to the ecological health of our Park and Open Space System. And this is just plant species. This isn't talk like the emerald ash borer, insects, or anything like that. This is just plants. And these 12 plants are actually threatening the overall integrity of our parks' ecosystems, and they have been found in just about every one of our parks. For example, here's 3 of the biggest offenders. This is garlic mustard that is found in a lot of our areas and starting to grow into more and more areas, but Greenwood Park is an example where it has a lot of garlic mustard, and once it takes over, it's pretty much the only species out there. This is Tree of Heaven. Probably the best offending example of this is actually at Waveland Golf Course at 55th and University at the northwest corner of the golf course there. That's all there is Tree of Heaven, and it's basically taken over that entire corner. And this is Japanese knotweed that is taking over smaller areas, but could threaten a much larger area eventually if it takes foothold. So these are just 3 of the offenders that could really take over and threaten our park system. Beyond that, he noticed that we've all heard and we've had presentations about the emerald ash borer that is starting to slowly creep its way towards Des Moines. But he didn't look at it from the fact that, but he noted that the green ash is the most prevalent species we have in our entire park and open space system. Between flowers and grasses and shrubs, oak trees, maple trees, you name it, the green ash is the most prevalent species we have out there, which means that when it does get here, the emerald ash borer will cause significant ecological disturbance to our park system. It will change the face of our park system and how it looks and how it feels. So it's something that we have to be prepared for, and we are working with the municipal arborist, David Yon, to address that and plan for that. Impending, we expect the board to get here eventually. Despite some of those issues that he found, we do have a lot of great opportunities out there. We have historic landscapes that we can restore. We can look at reducing our maintenance costs in times of tight budgets, improving our water quality, utilizing more of the parkland for different types of recreational opportunities, and at the same time, getting more and more people out into our park system to see about it and appreciate it. When Ben and I were preparing for this presentation, we actually had an opportunity to sit down with the city manager, and he still remembered that we had taken him out into the park system 2 years ago to look at some of these trees and kind of look at some of these areas that we don't normally get to. So it does make a difference when people get out into our park and open space system. Utilizing the inventory moving forward, we can use it to be in a leadership role. Being in Des Moines, the Park and Recreation Department, the biggest city in the state, we can be leaders in how we manage our natural resources and move forward in improving our water quality, reducing our maintenance costs, trying to find ways to attack those invasive species and reduce them. We're probably not ever going to get rid of them, but there's ways that we can manage and reduce them. And most importantly, we can protect and restore these historic landscapes. We cannot, in our lifetime or anyone's lifetimes, regrow 150 or 200-year-old oak trees. But those examples are out there. Even though in a degraded state, we can restore them and protect them for future generations to see what some of these landscapes looked like before Des Moines was settled as a city. We're already utilizing this inventory to prioritize our projects for implementation. That's why we targeted Greenwood Park and McHenry Park for priorities when we wrote REAP grants. We're using the data in the inventory to help track and implement some of our green infrastructure projects. We can use this data as a baseline for what these ecosystems look like in 2011 and 12. And then as we start to improve and restore these areas, we can actually go back and see the difference that we're making and actually have solid data behind it. And like we talked about, we actually can use this data to write grants and receive grants. That's a lot of the information that we found here in the inventory was actually very helpful and helped us score very high on those REAP grants. So we're using that to our advantage to get some of these grants and bring them back for these projects. One of the things that we found is that higher diversity of plants and trees actually will increase the amount of water that gets absorbed into the ground. That's less water that erodes into the ponds, the creeks, and the rivers. We can minimize some of the sediment in our ponds. We're spending a lot of work out at Greenwood Pond to try to improve the watershed above that so that we can slow the erosion down and keep that sediment out of the pond and preserve that as a recreational opportunity. Additionally, we're looking at minimizing flooding impacts. There are areas within our park system that could be converted to a wetland that actually absorbs and cleans the water before it gets to our creeks and our rivers. When we look at reducing our maintenance costs, we are looking at prescribed burns. As we get some of these landscapes under control, it's one of Ron's most effective tools to do that. A lot of times we like to show off the big fire picture when we're burning a prairie out at Grays Lake, but when we were kind of drafting this presentation, Lauren Lown at Polk County says, don't do that. It kind of scares people from the fire. This is what most of our fires will actually look like. They're very slow, creeping fires across our woodlands that basically just burn up the leaf litter, and we're finding they actually stimulate natural tree regeneration. Where we burned at McHenry Park, this bottom photo here, we're actually seeing tons and tons of new oak trees that are being stimulated. That's less money we have to actually spend on purchasing trees and planting in our park system. We're getting this for free just by burning these areas. So a great way to save on actually purchasing trees, and it's from the native stock that's here. And overall, we'll end up with a more resilient landscape, one that is healthier, stronger, absorbs more water, and can be protected and be around for a long time. Additionally, Dr. Rosburg talked about how ecosystem restoration should be one of the key tenets of what we do moving forward here. He kind of prioritized these areas. First should be the oak savannas. An oak savanna is actually an area that is one of the rarest landscapes in all of the Midwest, if not the entire North American continent. It's characterized essentially by a prairie that has trees that provide a canopy of less than 30% per acre. And we have a lot of areas in our parks, such as Prospect, Greenwood, Ashworth, McRae, Grandview, and Pioneer, that actually have very degraded examples of those that, if we look at restoration, can bring those back and really be a cultural and historic landscape here within the city of Des Moines. It's a unique opportunity that most cities do not have here. Woodlands as well is kind of a transition between there and forests. Prairie areas, he found that actually prairies are one of the most underrepresented landscapes we have in the city of Des Moines as compared to when the city was founded in the 1850s. So essentially, once you got outside of all the creeks and the rivers, Des Moines was essentially a prairie. And there's a lot of opportunities that small portions of our parks could be converted to prairie areas to stimulate education, but a more diverse landscape for insects and bugs and animals, and really reduce some of our maintenance costs because there's less turf that we're mowing. And finally, he said there's areas of wetlands that we could protect and preserve and even restore and create. A good example is the area behind County Soccer Complex. We own about 200 acres out there, but a small portion of it is actually used for the soccer complex. The rest of it, at various times, has either been farmed or is just left to flood. But he said there's an area you could restore and make a very nice wetland out there that could really absorb a lot of water before it reaches the river. Now, as we kind of look at how we move forward from here, our goal is we're going to present results to staff and to the public. One of the best things we can do as part of this is really tell this story, why this is important, and how we're going to use this moving forward. We're going to start to take this inventory. We're going to prioritize everything that Dr. Rosburg has said, look at the needs and how we move forward. We're going to start budgeting for the implementation of that. We have limited capital dollars, but we're just getting started on our capital budgeting process now. It also is an opportunity for us to seek alternative funding, such as the REAP program. Another key tenet is we want to look at, should we hire the expertise we need to manage these landscapes in the form of a natural resource superintendent? So we're investigating that possibility right now. But then we also want to look toward our friends at the Des Moines Parks to help us with volunteers or fundraising or just even getting the message out. They're great advocates for us and will be great advocates for moving this land management and the results of this inventory forward. We actually stole this quote from a presentation that Marlene did a few years ago with Don Tripp. I thought it was really good and it related to what we're doing here. Essentially, it says, city dwellers need above all things to renew frequent contact with soil and growing things, to engage in activities that are different from the daily routine of living and working. The most basic of all planning measures is the reservation of open spaces in such numbers and with such areas both within and without city limits that the majority of people can easily frequent them, thereby getting away from congested living and working spaces where air is unrestricted movement and is reasonably clean and pure. And you know, at the bottom, that was written in 1928, and something like that is still relevant today in what we're doing. So I appreciate your time, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. That was a very good, this is someone that is not knowledgeable on all that. Someone that's not knowledgeable, I thought you had a very good presentation. And does the invasive species, does the burning help control that? Or does it just take it away for a season?
No, it really is a combination of maintenance and management techniques. Once we get some of the invasive species under control, it'll actually help us to control them. One that I didn't put up there is honeysuckle, is a large shrub that really creates a green wall against most of our forested areas. Once we get like kind of an initial cutting through that, burning will help to keep that in check. So it is a combination of techniques. It's going to be really, we're going to have to look at a lot of different things and a lot of different ways to tackle this.
I think Ben, a couple of meetings ago, or maybe one meeting ago, talked about removing the ash as a majority tree into a minority tree with the onset of the ash borer coming and in your plantings and stuff, in your future plantings.
Yeah, we stopped planting the emerald ash tree, green ash, several planting cycles ago just because we knew this was coming down the pipe. Right now, the future of the ash and how we will treat it will resolve with the city's or municipal arborist. He'll make that recommendation. He's looking at all angles. I mean, you've seen the newspapers where even as close as Johnson, Iowa, they just said we're just going to get rid of them. There's a variety of ways to do it. Some people want to try to preserve some of these majestic ash trees to see if they can save them. So we're going to look at maybe a hybrid, but again, we'll wait till Dave Yon formulates an opinion on it and give it to us. But it's imminent, it's coming. And we were shocked to see that that was the most prevalent species we had in our system. So that means expense is coming down the pipe.
Good report.
Richard, that was a great report, and I would just like to try and emphasize, in ecosystems, I guess, what do they call it way back when I was in school, the photosynthetic process or something. One of the real problems we have, and you realize it, I think, and hopefully Dr. Rosburg will, is that none of this happens without water. And we have a horrible problem confronting us with water. We have running through our city a river that is one of the first, second, third, fourth, or fifth at the worst, most polluted river in the country. And the watersheds and those types of things, I'm sure he understands that, understands it well, and will also, as a part of this, take that into consideration in the needs that we have so we can go forward with this type of situation. It's an excellent report.
Absolutely. Definitely we are when we're working through these projects.
Any other questions, Richard? This gives us such a great basis for moving forward and what potential the city really has in the parks. The City Council was very appreciative of the report Monday morning, and I have to thank Richard. He did an incredible job.
Thank you.
And also the Urban Conservation Committee, and he came back and made lots of comments for a
Yes,
while.
absolutely.
But you tweaked it beautifully, and it just turned out to be a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.